And I kept writing, and I kept, the letter select the team just kept growing and growing and growing. I had a bunch of airmen like, hey, let me do this. Let me do this. And also during all of this was when the pandemic really kicked off. Right. So during this time, I knew that the biggest thing that they probably needed a little bit of support, because not only is the Air Force new to them, and I really consider BMT and tech school like one of the most vulnerable parts of your career, just because you got to do everything right. You know what I mean? And if you mess up, you better fix it. It's stressful because you're new to this kind of environment. You've never done anything like this before. A lot of people had to leave their families, and it could be an emotional roller coaster. So I knew that the biggest thing that they probably needed support, especially during this time, because COVID started changing BMT, and it started doing tent city, I think like the last week of training, and they had quarantines. And so during this time, my main focus was making sure that everyone had somebody to talk to. When you first get to BMT and you're in a flight with 50 other people, you don't know these people. And if you do, you probably met them at MEPS like 72 hours earlier. You know what I mean? So I get how it can be kind of lonesome, even though you're surrounded by people. And so I knew that the biggest thing that they probably need was support. So throughout the next couple months, that was my main focus. Just getting letters out there and saying, hey, look, I know you don't know me, and this could be weird for you, but I'm here for you, no matter what. I've been through a lot, so really anything you say or do can't really scare me. But I'd like to pass on knowledge that I've learned. I have airmen overseas and stateside writing to these airmen, and I can only imagine, what these trainees would feel like when they see a letter from friggin' Osan Air Force or Osan Air Base or Spangdahlem or Ramstein. I have quite a few airmen at Ramstein, so I can only imagine what their face would be like when they're like, who is this? Germany? What?
Wow. Yeah. I can't, you're right. Like just thinking back, like how scary basic training was for some people, it didn't seem to phase them, but other people,
Right.
it was very jarring. I mean, suddenly you're getting yelled at by strangers and you have to do everything perfect. So when you take that environment and you add a global pandemic where everyone's scared now, right? So like if the people in charge of you are scared, that's terrifying. I mean, really.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine, what they were going through and what their families felt, right? Their families had to have been worried. I mean, that's their kid that they just sent off and now everyone's on lockdown. Like what's going to happen to them? So, wow. So they needed you big time. It sounds like they needed you and they needed these letters and because when you're that low, you need any kind of support whatsoever. Any
Yeah.
little thing makes a huge difference at that point. So what was in these letters?
So I would write, I'd first off introduce myself, hopefully make them a little bit more comfortable talking to me, knowing I'm not some stranger. I'm an airman. I'd introduce myself. I'd kind of tell them what letter slocking is all about. I'd tell them, look, I know this is a kind of a new beginning in your life, and it could be scary. It could be awesome. I don't know what it is for you, but if you need anything, I'm here for you. I wanted to make sure that they knew that no matter what, no matter what they were going through, what they were thinking or feeling, they had someone to write to. Because you can't call them, right? You can't be like, hi, I'm here for you. But I was hoping that these letters, like being able to read that and hold it in your hands and be like, wow, like that's an outlet for them. I wanted the trainees to be able to feel like they had someone to confide into. They had an airman that really they could hopefully look up to. That was the goal, was to give them someone to look up to, kind of almost like an airman role model, really. To kind of help guide these trainees through BMT and through tech school. Some communications actually stayed through tech school. Airman Zeitz that I was talking about earlier, her and I messaged quite a bit. But there were a lot of airmen that would write letters back. And these letters, some of them were hard for me to read. It was heartbreaking, There were some people who wrote on the envelope, like, don't write back to this address. I'm getting sent home. And to me, I've cried reading letters. I've absolutely, myself and other airmen who, wanted to help with this program, like we've all had some moments where we're like, wow. I've written well over probably 500, 600 letters.
Are they typed or handwritten?
Okay. The first initial letter was handwritten for a while. And then I said, look, let me type this out. Let me get them pre-saved. And then when they respond, I'll handwrite them. I wanted to be as I think the genuine is the word I'm going to use, genuine as possible. When you're sitting down and you take time to handwrite a letter out to a trainee, for me, it's all in the small details. It's all in the small things. So that first initial letter, the mass one that I send to everybody, kind of explaining the program, yes, that one was typed, but when they would respond, I'd make sure that it's handwritten. That's my biggest. That's one of my. It's all in the small things. It's all about in the care that you put into it is what you're gonna get out of it. And this was from May 30th, so this was right after the program, about a month into the program, right? So this was like my first letter where it was sad. This is something that I wasn't expecting because when she would write to me, it just seemed like, oh, she got it. She's getting it. She's gonna make it happen. And some unforeseen circumstances came up, and this was the first letter that said, "Hey, here's my my home address. I'm going home." So she said, "Hi, wingman. I just wanted to give you a heads up that the current address you have for me is no longer valid. I'm officially being sent home next week or the week after. If you still want to talk to me, my address is," and she dropped it. She gave me her socials and contacts she wanted to keep in contact. And she kind of confided in me. She said, "I think it's a good thing that I'm going back home. My family's been butting heads. So maybe God or the universe is just telling me that the military is not the way to go right now. Home is where I'm needed at the moment." So I'm doing that, and I think it's better. So if you still want to communicate, I left my contact above. Feel free to drop me a message. So it was a very short and brief letter, but it was sad to hear because from other letters, I'm like, wow, she's killing it. She's really killing it. And then,
so like you got an insight to her mindset, and you just went through basic not that long ago. So the thing she was saying, you're like, she's getting it. I know she's doing good. And you were kind of along for the ride in a way, right? And then,
100%.
and then suddenly, you realize she's not making it, and which was like your biggest fear when you're in basic, right? Like you don't want to get sent back. It's a terrifying thought because like your whole future plans are now not happening and you have to rethink your whole life. So
it's just one of those things, like those letters, they hurt. And I'm one of those people, like I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like when I feel emotion, it's in tenfold. And so like reading these words, I felt for the trainees. I did.
Like, I'm starting to see why it took off the way it did. So I'm really glad that it's in your hands and you're still doing that. You're still there for people. I mean, that's incredible. And you've recruited so many people, and, a key to happiness is giving back. You're not going to be happy all alone. Even if you were a millionaire, you got all this money, if you don't have anyone in your life to give back to, you're missing out on a key part of your well-being and happiness. So,
and I want everyone to feel like they have somebody, because I remember how it felt. Yes, I had all this support when I was in BMT from my family, but there were times where I felt sad. There were times where I'm like, dang, like I want to hear it from an airman's perspective. Like, what is it like? Because I'm only in week 4 and I'm already kind of struggling a little bit. And, I remember getting really sad. I was just like, dang, like it was lonely. You can't really talk with family. There were a couple people on my flight and they were just down in the dumps. They didn't really form connections within their flight. And I know firsthand that can be hard. You don't know any of these females, but you're living with them for 2 months. No ifs, ands, or buts. And so I know how hard it can be to like connect with others because you don't really know what their background, you don't really know much about them sometimes. So I wanted each and every trainee to be like, okay, well, if I can't confide in my flight or I'm not comfortable putting myself out there like that, then let me just go shoot her a letter real quick. Let me just, let me write it out. And I find that when I write stuff out, either like, especially like emotion wise, like when I write stuff out and I put it into words and like I'm able to put in words how I feel, to me, that's clarity. Like I'm starting to think clearer. I'm starting to understand kind of the situation.
Before I joined, my mom and my stepdad, they love going to church. That's like their thing. And they're like, hey, we're going to give your name to churches so that they can write you. And I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't want, why are you doing this? Fine. Okay, whatever. Here's my address. And then I get to basic and darn it, if I didn't love those letters, like I needed those letters because in basic, I was struggling. Like I was kind of a spoiled kid. I felt like I was a spoiled kid looking back and to be thrown into that environment, I needed encouragement. I need encouragement. That's just who I am. I need words of encouragement. I need to know people have my back. I thrive like that. That's just who I am. Yeah. And I didn't have it. And I was struggling so bad. I was just down in the dumps. And I thought basic was going to be a breeze because I was I was a wrestler, a cross country runner. Physically, there's no way they could do anything to me to wear me out. But mentally, I was wore out.
Yeah.
And darn it, if I didn't like those letters from church, I can't tell you how much those helped me. Those truly got me through it. You have no entertainment, you have no TV, you have no music, no phone, you have nothing. Those letters are all those things to you now, right?
Yeah, they
that
are.
letter is basically your next episode on Netflix. That's what that letter is to you in that moment. I gotta say, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing feeling when you get that letter. I mean, there's nothing else like it, really.
But this letter says, "Dear future sister in arms." To me, I was like, "Aw, look at you go." He said, "I'm not."